Welcome to the Big Blue Radio Show, coming to you on Tulsa Community College's online radio station, The Grid, and on the Creativity Channel. I'm Lee Goodson, president of Tulsa Community College.
And I'm Greg Stone, provost of TCC's Metro Campus. At Convocation 2016, we visited with Dr. Rob Johnstone, one of the nation's leading experts on community college redesign and the guided pathways movement.
You'll hear that conversation today, including more about the importance of pathways for student success right here on the Big Blue Radio Show. Stay with us. Well, Dr. Rob Johnstone, we are honored to have you here at Tulsa Community College for Convocation today.
Thank you.
And you've had a wild day, and you're taking just a few minutes to sit here with Dr. Stone and myself to answer a few questions and just maybe even dive in a little more to your past and what you've done. So I'm just going to start with you in 2013 founded the National Center for Inquiry and Improvement. First of all, what is that? And second of all, what is that organization doing to help colleges improve their student success rate?
So I think a lot of people who end up in our roles in higher education have kind of a varied degree of backgrounds. I came out of 9 straight years of undergraduate education, stayed into a master's program, a doctoral program in social psychology and psychology in the law, and almost went into industry as a jury selection consultant and ended up in industry as a strategic consultant, helping companies focus on data and decision making and really kind of marketing strategy, strategic consulting. And I landed in the community college sector in 2002, actually because my dad played football at Foothill College and face masked O.J. Simpson in the mid-'60s. And when I was looking around Monster for my latest job after the dot-com crash and wanting to get out of the industry, Foothill College Director of Institutional Research came up. And although I looked at the salary and said, wow, that's not great, I did look at the job characteristics. It seemed to me like being an internal strategic consultant at a college, which is exactly the role I found and fell in love with. And it's 14 years later now, so I had come with a strategic consulting background from industry. Pretty quickly I got recognized within the field in California, in the community college system, as someone who could work with other colleges on things around data, around exploration. There's a group in California called the Research and Planning Group, who in addition to being a kind of a trade association for the institutional researchers, was also a kind of practitioner-based research and evaluation firm. So I was able to work with them a bunch. And eventually, as often happens with funding sources, the California funding sources for that organization kind of dried up. I was asked to come on full-time and help with the national kind of approach for the Research and Planning Group. And I started working on projects nationally, like Completion by Design with my friends at CCRC, Davis Jenkins and the team, Public Agenda, Allison Cadlick, Jobs of the Future, Laura Couturier, Michael Collins, Gretchen Schmidt. And on these completion movements nationally, I also got asked to work on the Aspen Prize for Community College Excellence, where we helped run the site visits on all the finalist colleges. So I just got this amazing, after working a bunch in California with their 115 colleges, moving into that national scene, got this amazing window, and my willingness to travel all over the country meant that I worked with a large number, I've worked with over 300 colleges in the last decade. When I formed NCII, it was to take the work that I'd done with the RP group, kind of under my own umbrella, and because RP was kind of refocusing back to California, so I kind of continued on this national stream. And look, NCII, I mean, it's easy to start your own company these days and call it whatever you want. But I did so with working with a lot of partners around the country, like the Community College Research Center at Columbia, like the Aspen Institute in DC, Achieving the Dream, CESI, all of our friends on the national project that Tulsa Community College is on. And I'm on the road 200 days a year. I'm working with colleges around the country doing keynotes and convocations like today, but also getting down in the weeds of stuff, working with colleges on improvement projects. And the 2 pillars of my organization are around completion and the guided pathways movement, and then the financial stability work that we do on helping low-income students succeed. And I'm lucky enough to work with some of the brightest and the best in the field, and with great colleges like Tulsa, who's been selected for this National Pathways Initiative that we're very excited about. These 30 colleges really working to take the next level and demonstrating what's possible for the other 1,100 colleges in the country.
Well, Rob, I wanted to ask you about that because you have consulted with a lot of institutions across the country for a number of years. What's working and what's not working with the completion agenda?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about this today in the convocation. It's an amazing kind of evolution in the relative scheme of speed in higher education change. This has happened very quickly. I mean, this system of higher education we have in community colleges and regional four-year schools in this country is about 500, 600 years old, and it's been largely untouched for that time. And the idea, a lot of that time, we actually didn't ask the question how many students are completing. We didn't ask the question how many students are getting through. We just kind of figured that happened or it didn't happen. It was on the students, not us. And I think what you've really seen in the last decade is a shift in that mentality. I mean, it's not everywhere yet. It's still pervading into many places. That maybe there's some things we can do differently that could change the conditions so significantly more students could get through. And so I think the challenge of the completion agenda is you are moving a 500-year-old entity that has largely not changed that much in 500 years when you think about how students take courses and they move through institutions. And so I think the challenge of that is the fundamental shift of guided pathways, in addition to the structure and the monitoring that we're talking about doing at colleges, is that the fundamental unit of measure in colleges and community colleges for years has been the course. And we're now talking about shifting that to a focus on what happens in the program. So that changes a bunch of structures, a bunch of organizational structures, a bunch of social structures, not necessarily job structures, although some of those change too. So the organizational change part of this is huge, and it's slow. And I think some colleges have moved it along, and I think Tulsa is in the early stages of really pushing all that they've learned on doing everything else they've done with it. I do think that the colleges that have gone, if you look at a 10-point scale of adoption, where 10s you're doing everything possible, the full Monty of guided pathways, and 0, the colleges who've gone to a 7, 8, or 9 have really seen some great improvements. It's when you dip your toes in the water and you only change one small thing for a small number of students. Of course, in that situation, you can't expect much to change from your overall rates. And so I think that the biggest trick to all of this is getting people to be ready to take the bigger steps, right, and be okay with it. And we've talked a lot in various sessions today about how, look, we know what's going to happen if we do things the old way. We have a certain level of success. Yes, some students succeed, and we're very proud of that. Not as many succeed as we would like. And so I think what we're moving to is a world where we're thinking more about how to change those conditions and ask the question, what's really best for students when we set up these policies and practices? So I think the more that's happened at a college, the more likely you are that the culture has gone farther with it. But I think the hardest thing is still the culture change issue. So,
culture change is probably a big reason you wrote the paper, 10 myths demystified.
Yeah, guided pathways demystified. Yeah.
Guided pathways demystified, because what you see in this culture change is I've been doing it this way forever, my whole career, you're going to change. Talk to us a little bit about what kinds of, give us a couple of examples of some myths that end up being big barriers to change, and maybe how colleges can go about addressing those within their internal culture.
Yeah, and I wrote that paper. I mean, my friends at Community College Research Center brought the book out of Redesigning America's Community Colleges, Tom Bailey, Shauna Joggers, Davis Jenkins. I do joke that they're selling you a book. I gave you a free paper. I'm just saying. But in that paper, those of us noted, yeah. So you hear that, Davis? Yeah. I've been going around the country the last 5 years on the road, traveling 250,000 air miles a year. Davis has been doing the same, Kay McClenny, Gretchen Schmidt. We hear a lot of questions about guided pathways. And what I did last year is just try to take the 10 I heard the most commonly. I think the ones that are the most interesting are, isn't free choice the cornerstone of American higher education? Isn't it what our system's built on? Isn't it what we're known for? And I think part of that is all these questions are great, by the way. I love getting the chance. You think I'm fired up normally. When I really get into those questions and getting to explore them with faculty and staff and administrators, it gets even more powerful. But I think that's a great question. I mean, the question you have to ask yourselves is, A, when we move to a guided pathways model, are we getting rid of free choice? I think the answer largely for me is no. We're structuring it. We're architecting the choice. The student still has the same number of choices. But here's the key. We're changing the choice from course selection to program selection.
Well, and you're changing the choice from uninformed choice to fully informed choice.
Yeah, and I think that's why guided pathways is the term. We've had a couple of terms. There's been the completion agenda. There's been structured pathways. I like architected pathways, although it sounds kind of scary. The idea is we're guiding you. We're giving you a foundation to make decisions. The student's still making the decisions. They're saying, what do I want to do? What are the careers I want to move into? What prepares me for those careers? So I do think there's still a lot of choice in the matter. Another big question is, well, isn't this just trying to further kill the liberal arts and the humanities? Or how does this work with a general education mindset? And that, I love that question, because people heard today who heard me. I am more passionate than anyone about a set of liberal arts outcomes that all colleges graduates should have. And I think that at the end of the day, we have to be really realistic with the fact that up to this point, the way those outcomes are achieved are through a randomly assigned selection of courses that students are just putting together as their general education package. I mean, we as colleges certify that every single one of the billions of combinations of those general education courses that fit together in a 20 courses that students take have the same outcomes, which if you're going to design a system would be the last thing you would ever do. I actually think we can take some ownership back over this and think about how do these outcomes go together? Like if we want critical thinking to be an outcome, where is that happening? Like what courses? We're not going to offer fewer humanities courses. We're going to offer the same number on the pathway, but maybe we think about how they fit together. They fit together with social science courses. I think those are some of the hardest questions. I mean, colleges ask questions about do we lose enrollment when we make things more mandatory or when we structure things. I think we've largely found that not to be the case. The final question that's big, it comes around, can students make career decisions at age 18 or 19? How do we know they're going to change their mind? Why should we put them on pathways? Well, two things on that. One is we'd like them to get into a career to be able to change from, rather than dropping out of college and ending up in a job that doesn't lead to a career, right? So one thing is let's get them to default progress towards something. The other thing is if they're truly going to keep changing and we have a solid foundation of liberal arts and general education for them to change from, and we're confident about that, it'll be easier for them to change. It's also easier to change from one clear thing to another clear thing than from chaos to chaos, right? So I think those are the most common questions that come up.
Talk to us about what you think the community college culture and world will look like 10 years from now.
Yeah, I mean, I close almost every one of my sessions with an amazing sense of optimism. I mean, every community college in this country has spent parts of the last 2 decades innovating. The problem has been largely they've been innovating with relatively small groups of students on the margins of a broken system. I guarantee you Tulsa can tell me stories of 5 great programs that all serve 30 students. Problem is Tulsa has 26,000 students. And so you don't get there with with programs of 30. You get there by, you'd much be better off moving the overall system, say 10%, than moving the system 80% for 30 students at a time, right? And I think we can move the overall system by more than that. But I do think that I think that what we're seeing is the possibility of the system itself changing. As you think about students coming into higher education, we do a better job with K-12. We do a better job drawing bridges between K-12 and our programs. Not just come to Tulsa, figure it out when you get here, but come to Tulsa Community College. Here's 20 things you could do, and here's what that would lead to. We can create different value propositions for our community and for our students that I think are only tangentially used now and rarely used. I envision a world, I ask colleges this all the time, by the way, in my improvement. It's one of my favorite questions to ask a working group of colleges. What do you want it to look like? So I asked them the first question, by the way, which is, all right, so there's a student entering in fall of 2016. How is their experience different than a student who entered in fall of 2010? That, by the way, is a really challenging question for most colleges to answer, because at most colleges, the answer is actually not that different. There's maybe mandatory orientation, you're doing some registration things. When you talk about that student experience of onboarding to the college and then what happens after they start, she or he, it really isn't that different. And by the way, if you go back from fall 10 to maybe fall 2000 and fall 1990, aside from online courses and like portals and things like that, which, I mean, if you ask yourself, when you put in an online portal, how much you expected your graduation rate to go up, no one's ever going to say that they expected that to happen, right? So we haven't attacked the systemic problems. I think what I see now between the guided pathways movement, which also includes rethinking how we do math and English, as you know, whether it's developmental education or accelerated models or concurrent models, and how we think about the role of those 2 domains in the curriculum, as well as the new work that's coming out on financial stability. I can envision a world where when a student comes in fall of 2021, it's a very different model. And I think it's a model that they'll know more clearly what they're here for, they'll know what it takes to get there, and they know that we have their backs if something goes wrong.
Think about that phenomenal opportunity the United States of America has if we can make that happen in the next 10 years.
You guys heard me today. I mean, I talk about the colleges who've done this. I mean, if you think about Georgia State, who's got 18,000 students, about 4,000 new students a year. when they improved their graduation rate from the low 30s to the high 50s, it's about 1,200 to 1,400 students a year more who are graduating with degrees of high quality that mean something in the marketplace than 10 years ago. Over a decade, that's 14,000 students. You guys have the same opportunity here. You know, a 25% increase in your completion rate is 10,000 students over a decade. That's a lot of students that's more students. And so the stakes are both that high, but I also am optimistic. I mean, even if we don't hit that big of a number, let's say you get halfway there, that's still 5,000 students in a decade. That's a lot of students. So it's exciting times.
We just have a minute or so left.
Yeah.
But now that we've asked you to look ahead, let's ask you to look back.
Yeah.
We always ask our guests, if you could go back in time and give your 18-year-old college-going self one piece of advice, what would that be?
It's a really hard question. I am one of those rare people who loved both my college experience and that my transitions into graduate school went very well. I didn't have any money. I would have probably said to think about getting into the service of higher education or education earlier. I actually look back on it and go, my industry experience really provided a foundation for me. I think if I was totally honest with myself, the skill sets that I happened to apply in industry could have been applied to higher education earlier. I think I would tell that 18-year-old to be a little more meta-analytic about how I thought about higher education, because what I realized when I came back in 2002, after going through from 87 to 96 when I got my doctorate, straight through 9 years, is that when I came back in 2002, I'd never thought about the process of education much at all. I just did it. And you know, when you're 18, you're 19, that's one thing. I don't know if my 18-year-old self would have listened to me. But I think what I was realizing as I went through that is there's much I didn't like about that process of education. I was really lucky. I went to Stanford undergrad, which is one of the top schools in the country. I don't think the pedagogy I got there was any different than I would have gotten had I gone to Foothill College, which is right next to Stanford where I worked. You had researchers who were better. The student population had more, quote unquote, was more prepared. I actually think I could make the argument that pedagogy was worse. And I didn't go to class much. I wouldn't tell myself to go to class because I didn't need to go to class, partially because the pedagogy was so bad, right? What I would say, though, is to think about that more then and what it meant for what I could potentially help higher education do. That's when I came back in 2002 and realized that the petri dish for all of this, the ultimate lever for change, is in the community college system. It's where most of the students in the country start. It's a really powerful set of moral and ethical outcomes that we're working towards. And I think we already have paved the way for it, and I think it's time to take that next step. I'm really excited about it. So.
Well, we've been excited to have you here in Tulsa today.
All right.
We thank you for
Very
your time.
much so. Thank you.
And we thank you all for your time as well. Don't forget, you can find us every week on The Grid, tulsacc.edu/thegrid, and on the Creativity channel. And we will see you next time.